respected Chair, my panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. And thank you to BSX for inviting me to speak alongside this very learned panel. My name is Ganendra, and I represent Miasat, a regional satellite service provider based out of Malaysia. Miasat has been operating for about 30 years now. We're nearly 20 million direct-to-home pay TV subscribers across India, Malaysia, and Indonesia who use our services today. I'll try to give a more commercial view to the topic that we have on today, where when we talk about emerging trends in satellite communications, I really would like to talk about high-speed broadband for rural areas. This particular area is probably worth to focus on because what we see clearly today is the demand for internet data. Over the last 20 years, the demand for these type of services has grown exponentially, 1,000-fold in fact. And the internet, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's the clear killer app of our generation. At Miasat, we have started to go down this path and look at satellite-based broadband networks for rural areas in Malaysia. Our homegrown brand, Connect Me, covers around 300,000 people today in rural communities, and we'll aim to cover about 2 million people in the next couple of years with our new Miasat 3D HTS satellite. This model of providing direct-to-consumer type of broadband services to communities is a real game changer to rapidly address the digital divide seen in Malaysia and can be applied in many other countries in the region. Yet, I would like to also say that I think consumer broadband services is probably just barely scratching the surface on the internet's true potential. While I think today the internet demand is fueled by video consumption and largely by people, what's emerging potentially is an even larger driver of data demand is consumption of the internet by machines. Yeah? So what I'm talking about here is really about the Industrial Revolution, or IR 4.0 as we call it. And with the concepts that we are talking about in terms of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and machine-to-machine communications, essentially what we are saying is that once machines start to talk autonomously to one another, we will be able to deliver goods and services faster and cheaper, but you need to have communication services that are there. With 8 billion people around the world, that's only a certain amount of data we can consume, but there will be a far more larger amount of machines needing to communicate with one another, and that will fuel the demand for internet services. So, and I think that's the real opportunity here for us, people in the satellite communications world. To enable IR 4.0 alongside with the terrestrial technologies, satellite technologies that I see that are advancing include the high throughput satellites that are being combined with software-defined payloads. So essentially, we're saying gigabytes of data will be delivered flexibly wherever services can be of demand. Multi-orbit networks between GEO satellites and non-GEO satellites operating seamlessly to create flexibility between bandwidth-intensive and latency-sensitive apps. And finally, advancements in much more recently, satellite to smartphone type of connectivity, where bulky satellite terminals will not be required to deliver services to end users. That's probably coming up in the near future. With these type of technologies, satellites are likely to play a very large role as a solution of choice in rural and remote areas and complement the terrestrial networks for ubiquitous coverage. Some issues that we see include spectrum. Of course, there's a continuous tug of war between mobile and satellite industry for access to spectrum globally. I think at the end of the day, a practical kind of middle line needs to be drawn where we decide and be guided where and when a particular technology is considered the most efficient use for spectrum to determine priority. This has to be something that has to be put out in the room and discussed continuously. The other issue is ground terminals. And while today, in terms of fixed terminals, we have somewhat reached an economies of scale, but mobility-based terminals in all sorts of applications need to achieve the same sort of cost efficiencies of fixed terminals before the technologies that I talked about can achieve wide-scale adoption. So these two areas need to be addressed for us to truly provide ubiquitous connectivity. And in short, the satellite communications will be a key component to address the seemingly unsatiable data demand in the world currently. To reach this goal, I think we already see many companies and investors are funding non-geo constellations, acquiring ground terminal technologies, and consolidating companies to address the data demand. But beyond just the business, I also would like to add another point. The technology that us as satellite communications providers provide is also a socio-economic tool to address the digital divide rapidly. It enables rural communities to access the internet, which adds another element, which is really the digital inclusion for society, and ultimately just help our countries all move forward. In short, I think Miasat sees a bright future for satellite services in the coming years, and here in India, and as well as the rest of the world. And I look forward to us working together to bring forward these concepts in both in consumer broadband and IR 4.0, and fuel the basically satisfy the data demand that is obviously in